The American chestnut tree. These trees were often called redwoods of the East, and it's easy to see why. Their trunks could reach diameters of 10 plus feet across, and these trees could easily reach heights of 100 plus feet tall. And not only that, they were nut producing, so they were a major food source. All American forests, these trees had a huge native range, as you can see by the map. They spanned from groves in southern Maine all the way through to northern Georgia, Alabama, and Mississippi, primarily through the Appalachian region, as seen by the 31% of the Great Smoky Mountain National Park. That is a huge number of trees, especially if that is the only tree that made up that percentage. They tended to grow on mountainsides with an elevation from 1,000 to 4,000 feet, and it is believed it's because the trees really enjoyed the nutrient-dense soil that was found on the ancient Smoky Mountains. Uses. So I cannot stress enough how big of a food source these trees were, not only for wildlife, but also for the people, native populations, as well as settlers and people all the way up into the 1920s when the trees started to get sick. The tannins that were found in the bark could be used and extracted to tan leather hides. Pictured above me is a tannery that would use acid wood and the tannins extracted from the chestnut bark. Not only that, it set an industry standard for lumber. It was hardwood. It was beautiful hardwood. Ways of life. Chestnuts were a primary food source for livestock, so people would feed their cattle and their pigs off of chestnuts and fatten them up before they butchered them to preserve them for the winter. Holiday treats. We all heard chestnuts roasting on an open fire, and that just fueled the demand for the American population. Like I mentioned before, a logging industry standard. This wood was amazing. It was used for hardwood, it was used for railroad ties, telephone poles, furniture, you name it, it was probably made from chestnut lumber, as well as Appalachian traditions. During my research, there was a lot of personal accounts from people that remember going out with bed sheets and filling them up with chestnuts and bringing them back home for mom to either crack them open and enjoy them or process them down into a meal of sorts to make something similar to cornbread, but it would be made primarily from nuts. These nuts are super rich in all sorts of fatty acids, omega fatty acids, as well as they're super nutrient dense. I mean, they're coming from this giant existing carbon sequencing being of a tree. The downfall. So Cryphonica parasitica was the fungus that was introduced around 1904 to the American chestnut population. What happens is it grows a canker around the trunk of the tree, which then, as a result, starts to deplete nutrients. If you guys know anything about chaga, it's kind of a similar process with birch trees. Slowly, it starts to take the nutrients that the tree is sending up, as well as the tree is sending back down, which is now causing stunted leaf growth, as well as bark decay, and it's an open invitation for infection, bugs, woodpeckers, termites, all sorts of things to come in and kill that perfectly healthy tree. By 1940, most of the trees were dead, and this is a contributing factor as to why there was a really high demand for chestnut lumber and nuts for the American population, which led to the import of new chestnut varieties. Specifically, the one from Asia is which one that brought the fungus over. Logging operations continued, as well as cross-contamination from boots and axes, and hauling lumber across state lines all resulted in this fungus spreading at 50 miles per year, which is a huge rate. Now, I'm going to move my camera over a little bit. Wildlife populations were the very first to feel the effects. Obviously, they're starving. There is no food source anymore. It's estimated that 7 different native moths went extinct. The cost of raising livestock skyrocketed, and post-World War II, convenience foods were at an all-time high, and the diet of Appalachia kind of changed forever at that point. And with this quote, it says, "With the death of the chestnut, an entire world did die, eliminating subsistence practices that had been viable in Appalachian mountains for more than 4 centuries. The chestnut today. The American chestnut tree is still around to this day. Ancient stumps and underground root networks send up new chestnut saplings every single year, but most of them die off before they have a chance to become established. The root networks are still connected and they're still alive. And there's research being done by a couple of these foundations, including the American Chestnut Foundation, the Chestnut Research and Restoration Project, and the Appalachian Trail Conservancy. Hopefully, there's an end game where our great-grandchildren are able to see and enjoy the giant, beautiful tree that is the American chestnut.